All right, Nick, let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys fans will be surprised to know, yes, again, we're talking about another free agent signing the Cowboys have made. They're on a roll lately. I think they're doing a great job this season. There's a lot of volume coming into the team. And we talked about the strategy earlier about how they're making just great football signings, not anything too flashy, just guys that are consistent and good football players. And this latest move is no different. I think this is a big one for the Cowboys going forward. We're going to dive into that in just a moment. But first, I'm Andrew. That's Nick. And this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, another free agent addition by the Cowboys. Let's jump straight on into it. We can talk more about it on the other side. This from on X at Ian Rapport, at Rapsheet rather. It says, reunion, hashtag Commanders free agent edge Dante Fowler Jr., one of the top players available, is signing with the Cowboys on a 1-year, $8 million deal, per the insiders. There's a full circle moment as Fowler was in Dallas in 2022-2023 season. The deal was negotiated by Sean Kiernan and Tom Pavanelli of at Athletes First. I think this is a really solid move. A guy familiar with the Cowboys coming back into the fold after they've lost some pass rush. They gain it back with a guy like Dante Fowler Jr. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Cowboys fans, in the comment section below, you're familiar with the guy. You know him. You've seen him on the field before. You know what he's capable of. He's gotten better, coming back again. Let us know what your thoughts are on Dante Fowler Jr. signing. What is this? Is this an A signing? Do you love it? You wanted him to come back in the fold? Is this a C signing? You're not so sure. You want to see how he comes back and what he's able to bring to the table? Or is an F, you knew all along, he left before, you never wanted him to come back? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest signing by the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think it's outstanding, right? And again, it's a good deal. $8 million per year on a guy who just came off a double-digit sack season with Washington. Obviously, he's on the other side of 30. He's not going to get the mega, $20 million a year average like Oso Odighizuwa got in terms of being that valuable based on his age and his career path at this point. But he's a good pass rusher. He has experience working across Micah Parsons. This, I think, is just indicative of a strategy the Cowboys are using, where it is Micah Parsons' defense and they're building around him, which is 100% the right approach to make. One of the reasons you bring back Oso Odighizuwa is because he works so well with Parson in tandems when they run those stunts and games together in pass rush situation. Fowler has done that, of course, with the Cowboys. They've got Williams coming back, of course, off of injury. Hopefully, he takes the next step. They bring in some solid veteran players who have good potential, who are good locker room guys, who have no problems working with a guy like Parsons and Turner and Solomon Thomas. We mentioned those, of course, a few days ago. So this is all about building the defense around Micah Parsons, which is 100% the right approach. Anytime you have a star, anytime you have this elite level player, Micah Parsons is obviously one of the best, I will say, five defensive players at any position in football. You want to build around them. And it sounds kind of obvious, but a lot of teams don't. In fact, the Browns failed to do that with Myles Garrett. And you can make an argument the Steelers failed to do that with TJ Watt. When you have a superstar defender, you want to give him a lot of tools around him that can allow him to be successful and create opportunities for him. The Rams actually did this with Aaron Donald prior to the Super Bowl run. People remember, of course, them adding Matthew Stafford. That was probably the most important part. The Rams also did a great job bringing in some veteran players to surround Aaron Donald so that way Donald could be unleashed, especially in those key moments in big games, and carry the Rams to a championship that season. I think the Cowboys are following a very similar approach here. It is Micah Parsons' defense, it is Micah Parsons' team, and they're building a unit around him that will unleash Parsons. Now, I'm hoping to see, whether it be through the draft or little bit later, some more defensive line on the interior to get some more run defense. Obviously, they added some linebackers that will hopefully help in that department. Maybe, obviously, scheme with Eberflus will change, of course, so maybe they'll be a little bit better against the run in 2025. That's the one question mark I have at this point, at least right now, with this defensive front, this front seven. But this is a really, really good move by the Cowboys. You get a guy who wants to be there. He's been in Dallas before, has no problem being, the star on his helmet, the attention and the media fanfare that can go with it. Some guys, they don't have the guts to handle it, right? Of course, we know Dalton Schultz famously complained about that in the situation. Listen, if you don't have the mentality, if you're not an alpha guy, if you're kind of a beta and you don't want to deal with being in Dallas, It's not for everybody, right? You go somewhere else and you get 10% of the endorsements, 10% of the attention. You can go live in obscurity, and that's fine. No problem with that. It's not for everybody. Dante Fowler says, "Hey man, it's for me. I have no problem working with Micah Parsons. I have no problem coming to Dallas." They got him at an $8 million again deal according to the report, which interestingly enough, and I saw this on X. I don't know if this is 100% verified, but I've seen a few people say this, is that this is the most on a per year basis, that 8 million number the Cowboys have spent on an external free agent since 2015, since Greg Hardy came into the fold. So we're looking at a new era in Dallas. $8 million certainly isn't a lot, but it definitely indicates a trend. The Cowboys are at least willing to spend some money now on external free agents, albeit a familiar one. Good move, good locker room guy, great addition for Dallas.
Yeah, Nick, I think this guy is very special, and I think he brings a lot to the table as far as what he does in the pass rush. And it's going to be really helpful for the Cowboys to bring in a guy like this, especially after, the Marcus Lawrence situation. He leaves. You got a guy in Lawrence who he was good too. Last year or wasn't necessarily, his best year, but he's been a solid pass rusher for his team. But honestly, I think if you add up the last 5 years for Lawrence, the last 5 years for Dante Fowler, I think Fowler can be just as good, if not a little bit better, in the pass rush department when it comes to conversions, getting those sacks on the table, which that's really important. I know getting pressure on the quarterback is important in general, but if you can convert those into sacks, the play ends immediately. Sometimes pressure, if guys have a high number of pressures, it doesn't always mean that, you necessarily are getting the play, making the play. Maybe they scramble out of the pocket. Maybe they get, a short pass downfield. It could be a positive play for the offense in some regard. A sack always ends in the end of the play. So a guy that can convert more, I know it sounds silly, but that's something that is matters. And that's what Dante Fowler has been great at in his career. Sometimes not necessarily being that full-time guy. You look at what he did in Dallas the last 2 seasons, 2022, 2023, average around 300 snaps per year there. Wasn't a full-time guy, more of like a rotational pass rusher for them. You see what he did in Washington, 642 snaps there. Then sack numbers boost up for him almost double as well. Double the amount of snaps, double the amount of sacked for him as well. So I think this is really good signing by Dallas. I think a guy coming in now that you saw him as a rotational piece, he left. You saw what he's able to do as a full-time guy on the field. I think now he comes back in the fold, starts to get a little bit more playing time. I think he's going to be a solid player for the Cowboys. I think he's going to bring a lot to the table. And I think we're going to see a lot more conversions, a lot more sacks being made. And like you said, Micah Parsons being unleashed, that's never a bad thing as well. He's going to do what he does regardless as if who's playing on the other side of him. But I think he's just going to be even better from what he's getting from Dante Fowler.
Yeah, and you brought up DeMarcus Lawrence, Tank Lawrence, in his comments, of course, and I think there's a point I want to hit on regarding that whole debate. And look, Lawrence was a good player for a long time with the Cowboys, but he never was a great player. It's one of these weird myths, is because you play with the Cowboys, if you're a good player, you're on TV all the time, people say your name all the time, and people think you're a superstar, right? It just is what it is. Where being the Cowboys, you're like, oh, someone's a good player, and suddenly they're an All Pro. That's not how it works, right? But the Cowboys actually now have legitimately two of the top two or three people in their position, maybe the best on one side of the ball. You've got Micah Parsons as an edge rusher and CeeDee Lamb at wide receiver. And we're seeing the Cowboys just orient their team around these two guys going forward. Lamb is the best receiver since Michael Irvin. Micah Parsons is the best defensive player since DeMarcus Ware. You could argue maybe even since Deion Sanders, right? Not taking anything away from Ware. Ware was fantastic. That's the kind of conversation, of course, that Micah Parsons is in. CeeDee Lamb is better than Des Bryant. Like Des Bryant does a lot of talking on social media, and Des Bryant was a good player. Don't get me wrong, but Lamb is so much better, so much more versatile than what Bryant did when he was with the Dallas Cowboys. And he's also, I think, a better locker room guy as well. We're seeing the Cowboys reorient. They're no longer going to be a haven for overpaying good players just because they're Cowboys, right? DeMarcus Lawrence took a great deal to go with Seattle. He's on the other side of 30. Hey, great. I'm happy for you, dude. Take your money. That's phenomenal. But you were a good player. You were never a primetime player. You had one sack in 7 postseason games. You almost choked that victory against the Detroit Lions back in 2014. I don't know if you remember, people remember that. He actually recovered a fumble that would have just about ended the game. Then he fumbled. He later got a sack to save himself. But again, he almost choked that away. That was the only sack he's ever had in the playoffs, right? He is not a primetime performer. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong, a borderline Pro Bowl player at time. He's had a couple seasons with really nice PFF grades. He's a good addition. But the reality is he's a superstar. And people like to treat Lawrence like he is, and he never was. And I think that's what we're seeing in Dallas. We're seeing a shift to recognizing true merit-based evaluation of the roster. Micah Parsons is a legitimate superstar. CeeDee Lamb is a legitimate superstar. A lot of these other guys over the past 10, 15 years have been just good players, and the Cowboys have been a good team, right? I think they've had 3 losing seasons since 2012, I believe. You can go by each of those numbers. That's a long time, right? They've smattering of playoff performances, a number 1 overall seed, a bunch of division titles, a few playoff wins, right? They've been a good team. But the problem is they've overemphasized the good solid instead of trying to focus on the great and unleashing the great. Micah Parsons is great. CeeDee Lamb is great. Now is the time to unleash and orient their team to those 2 players, and that's exactly what the Cowboys have done this offseason. Tank Lawrence's comments, hey, take him with a grain of salt. This is a guy who thinks he's a superstar. He's not. He was a good player, and God bless him. I hope he has a great career with the Seattle Seahawks, finishing out his tenure as a National Football League player. But the Cowboys are making smart moves here in terms of we're going to build a structure of good, solid players to address some areas on our team while orienting ourselves toward our superstars. It's the right approach to make when you have superstars. Great decision making by the Dallas Cowboys.